it's bizarre because there's many ways where it doesn't even feel like the prosecution is so much interested in getting to the guilty verdict. It's more so we got to cover up this. We got to cover up this. We can't give you the right tools to even like participate in the fight. So we're going to change the rules this way and that. I mean, it just, it doesn't make a lot of sense at all.
Right.
The way that it's being played out. How is was Richard Allen in the courtroom that day?
He was. He
What
was. And
was I mean, what was from obviously he was I'm sure quiet sitting there, but
yep,
what was his demeanor? What was he looking like? We only saw
I
very
thought
short clips of him walking in.
I thought he looked better.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I thought he put on some weight. I was sitting behind his wife couple rows, and I mean, he was making solid eye contact with her. It seemed to be some kind of like nonverbal communication between husband and wife.
Yeah.
It was whereas, which was a big improvement. From the times I'd seen him before, he looked like a zombie.
Yeah.
So there were times when he'd be looking up at the vast ceiling and kind of like staring off into space and just I mean, so I think he floats in and out a little bit,
Yeah.
but in terms of like how I've seen him in the past, I would say that there's been improvements in terms of his mental health. But that's just me observing,
Yeah. Sure.
but he looked healthier, both physically and mentally to me.
Okay. Uh, where does this go with the lost tapes and the lost, not even lost, just never keeping a record of who they interviewed in that time window, because that seems to be kind of a big thing, and then just to take their word of, yeah, we lost it, we don't know who we interviewed, but it doesn't matter, it would be nothing to exonerate. How would you know if you don't even know who
Right.
you interviewed?
In the first days, the most critical days of the
Yes.
investigation, I mean, they have TV shows the first 48, it's like
Exactly.
those are like, the critical days, and it's all overridden. And ultimately they get on the stand, and they had Mullen, the state put Mullen on again. And he tells the story. He's like, look, and we're talking about a DVR, which is all, a digital video
Yeah.
recorder that had 6 terabytes of memory. And the story that he tells is that somehow a setting got changed in order to have the thing running in the 3 different rooms. I believe he said that it records 3 interview rooms. And so for 3 days, this thing's running, 3 full days. Uh, and that somehow that overrides all of those 3 days because it goes through all the memory and then starts overriding it. And when they finally discovered that this has occurred, now I had somebody come on who's a security expert and tell me on one of my lives, he's like, look, I could just tell you a 1 terabyte DVR is capable of recording that many rooms 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 30 days before it overrides.
Yeah.
So when you do that math, so with 6 terabytes, we're talking that should have been able to record 6 months. I'm
Three.
like, where was this guy
Yeah.
testify for the defense? Because
Yeah.
they provided no proof. They
Yeah.
provided no proof when that it actually occurred. It's just a story that they're telling. There's some story about them getting Chinese software. There's no proof that they bought it. There's no proof of what they tried to do with it. That none of that was put on. At the end of the day, though, what she is going to say is that they provided you with narrative summaries of the interviews. That's going to suffice. The question then becomes, and what I was hoping that Baldwin was going to ask is, how long was the interview of Brad Holder? Okay. Did the investigator take notes? Where are those notes? Have you turned those notes over to the defense? Like all these questions are going to point to, when did he write his summary report? Was it the next day or was it 2 months down the road? If it was 2 months down the road and he didn't have notes, what did he use to refresh his recollection as to what was said? He obviously didn't have the video. How is he writing the report?
Yes.
So all those things didn't come out. Ultimately, Gull's going to say, I'm guessing, is going to say, look, you got the summary reports. You go interview Brad Holder. There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
It's
other than
not the
Holder
same
saying,
all these years later.
Exactly. And who knows, he has no obligation to talk to them.
No.
They're not law enforcement. He could tell them to pound sand
Well, and
and,
I'm sure in how many years now, if he needed to get an alibi of some sort, he could have figured that out pretty well at this point in time. A little
yeah,
different
and
conversation all these years later.
absolutely. And the thing with Holder is, a lot of the pushback with him is that he claims that he does have an alibi, that, he had clocked into work that day and that he clocked out around 5. And, we have no idea if that's true, but even assuming if that is true, what we don't know, we have no idea when the girls were actually killed.
Yeah.
Like people are just assuming that this happened as soon as they went down the hill. From what I've heard about the descriptions of the crime scene, the crime scene does not belie that fact. It does not demonstrate that that's where it happened, because it appears very much like they were not killed in that spot, that they were brought there and staged there, and
Yeah.
so which would mean that it would happen somewhere else. We know that the medical examiner wasn't able to establish a time of death, which means it could have happened anytime from the girls go missing all the way up until the time that they're discovered
Hmm.
the next morning.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the time of death is. So him saying that he was work till 5 o'clock means nothing.
No.
What happens if the things took place at midnight, under the full moon, with
Yeah.
howling wolves and guys wearing Viking
Yeah.
who knows? But
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like that's not an alibi to me when we don't know what the time of death is. Like an alibi only works when you know when somebody was killed, right? So
It's kind of just shocking that some of this can even take place.
it's
That
a lot,
that a
man.
judge can be like, oh, okay, well, that works. That we can have no evidence. We can have all these pieces of evidence missing, all these interviews missing, and no notes on who was even, and be like, yeah, shit happens.
Yeah, because look, I mean, at trial, that's when we're gonna find out. That's
Yeah.
when we're finally gonna get our answers as to why the hell the unified command decided not to follow this thing. Now, if they can come up with, if their answer is, well, Brad Holder gave us an alibi, so he was off the list. Elvis Fields, he's incredibly stupid and he's got the IQ of a 7-year-old, so he was off the list. He's not capable of this. Johnny Messer, he said that he wasn't in town. You know what I mean? If that's what their excuse
Like that's
is,
the evidence he said.
right? He said, and it's like if that's what it is, the case has a real problem. And then, you have to look at when all we care about is justice for the girls. I'm like, did they blow it with respect to Richard Allen because they just didn't have enough evidence? And if he is the culprit, like that's the biggest nightmare. So right, the biggest nightmare would be if Richard Allen was actually the guy and they end up McClellan can't prove the case up
Hmm.
because he just doesn't have enough evidence, or whatever approach he decides to make just isn't enough. And he can't deal with this issue of having 4 or 5 other alternate suspects that seem as likely, if not more likely, to be the culprits. And then if Richard Allen was the guy and then he walks,
Hmm.
like, can you imagine what a nightmare that would be? Like, oh my
Yeah.
god,
And
but
yeah. And
yeah,
all
I don't
because
like.
of incompetent behavior and incompetent police
Yeah,
work. I mean that,
right.
eh,
And egos,
yeah, and egos. That's
right?
really what so much of this is just coming down to. And oh my
Yeah, it's a
god.
lot.
Well, do you think we're going to see the trial date that has been set for this, or do you?
I do, I
Yeah.
do. I think Gull actually announces to the court that the jurors' questionnaires went out.
Okay.
So like 600 jurors got their questionnaires in Allen County, and the jury's going to be picked up there. So they will go into Allen County, pick the jury back there, and then they'll be sequestered back in Carroll County. And I think this thing's going, man. Like
Yeah.
wheels are in motion. Like beyond just lawyers talking about it. Now the county clerk's gotten involved. Now the jury questionnaires are out there. People are having to respond to them. They're getting sent back.
Yeah. Like
I
flight
have
attendants
I have
prepare for
yeah.
takeoff.
I think it's going,
All
man.
right.
So let's go. Let's get
Let's
it to
go.
trial.
Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and press that bell so you don't miss any of our updates on the cases we're following for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast from True Crime Today. And thanks